The prince who broke his father's heart. King David had a son who was the most beautiful prince you ever could imagine. Tall he was and fair. The hair of his head was beautiful and heavy. His eye was like the eagle's and swift his foot as that of the wild deer upon the mountains. From the crown of his head to the sole of his foot there was no blemish in him, and the name he bore was Absalom. But though he was so tall and fair, though his head glistened, and his eyes shone, and his foot was swift, and naught of blemish could be found in him, yet Absalom had a proud heart, and a proud heart that was bad. For he had been brought up to have whatever he wanted, and to do whatever he would, and his father never had rebuked him, nor asked him why he did this, or why he should not do that. And as you shall see, because his father did not make him obey, and never punished him for his headlong ways, Absalom loved not his father, but only himself. And loving himself, he went on his way to grief, and broke his father's heart also. For when he was grown, Absalom said to himself, "Why should I be only a prince in Israel? I am the most beautiful man in the kingdom. I am the king's best son. I shall be king." So Absalom got for himself a fine chariot to ride in, and fine horses to draw him in his chariot, and 50 men to run before him and shout, "Make way for Prince Absalom!" And he would go in his chariot in the morning and sit by the palace gate, and when any man would come to the way to go to the king, Absalom would call to him and take him by the hand and kiss him. And he would ask him about his home and about everything he had and what he wanted. And then Absalom would say, "Too bad, my friend, too bad. There is no set by the king to hear your case and give you justice. If only I were made judge in the land." So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. And then, when he had stolen almost all their hearts, Absalom rose up and rebelled against his father, King David, in Jerusalem, and called upon the people to make him king in his father's place. So when King David heard how his beautiful but proud and bad son Absalom had rebelled against him, he rose up with his friends and his men of war, and fled out of Jerusalem and away across the Jordan, and there he came to the city of Mahanaim, and he stopped with all his men to rest. His friends, who lived near by, brought him beds for all his men, and dishes and food in abundance. And David and his men were rested from their weariness. But Absalom had gathered an army too, thousands upon thousands of men of Israel, and now the beautiful but wicked prince came with all his army to find his father David and kill him. But David's men would not let him go out to the battle. They said, "You must stay here in the city while we fight for you, for they will not care for us if you are there, but will seek only to kill you." Then David said to Joab, his captain, and to all the captains, "Deal gently for my sake with the young man, even with Absalom. For though his son was so bad that he would kill his father, yet his father loved him and would save him if possible." Then the men of David went to fight in the forest with the men of Absalom. And the men of David beat the men of Absalom, and all the men of Absalom ran away. So Absalom himself came face to face with the men of David. And as he was riding upon a mule, he went under a great oak, and his head, with its heavy hair, was caught in the thick boughs of the oak, and the mule went from under him, and left him hanging there. When Joab heard that Absalom was hanging in the oak, he did not do what David had told him to do and save the young man, but he went as fast as he could and took 3 darts and thrust them through the heart of Absalom and killed him. Then Joab's men took Absalom and cast him into a deep pit in the forest and raised over him a great heap of stones. David was sitting in the gate of the city, waiting for word from the battle. His heart was afraid not for himself, but for the son he loved, the son who did not love him, Absalom. There came a man running from the battle, and when he was near, they could see that he was Ahimaaz. And Ahimaaz said to David, "All is well, the Lord has given you the battle." And David asked Ahimaaz, "Is it well with the young Absalom?" Ahimaaz did not want to tell, so he said, "I saw a great tumult as I left, but I did not know what it was." Then another man came running, and when he was near, they could see that he was Cushi. And Cushi said to David, "Tidings for my lord the king, God has given you the battle." And David asked Cushi, "Is it well with the young man Absalom?" And Cushi said, "May all your enemies, my king, be as that young man is." Then David knew that Absalom was dead, and he went up into the tower over the gate weeping, and as he went he cried, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom! Would God I had died for thee! Oh, Absalom, my son, my son!" Now Joab came back with all his men from the battle, and he heard King David weeping and crying for Absalom. And he went up into the tower and said to David, "You have made your friends ashamed, because you show that you hate them who love you, and love them who hate you. I see that if Absalom had lived, and all we had died this day, it would have pleased you well. Now go out and thank your soldiers, or everyone will leave you by tonight." Then David stopped crying for his son, and went out and greeted his soldiers and thanked them. And well it was that Absalom was dead, for his father never had trained him right, and he had had his own way. So, although he was tall and fair, though his hair was beautiful, though his eye was like the eagle's and his foot like the deer's, and though there was no blemish to be found in him from the crown of his head to the sole of his foot, yet he was unlovely in his soul, for he loved but himself, and he brought many to sorrow, and he broke his father's heart.